Okay, so this is picking back up with the previous video we just looked at. In part one, looked at setting up automatic testing with Travis CI. This is the Travis YAML file we were working on. We've created a little cold box project here, and we demonstrated getting it set up with command box, which is kind of the cold box or the cold fusion command line environment that fires up cold fusion servers and runs our test scripts. And we demonstrated breaking the build with by updating something that the test wasn't expecting, and then we fixed the test to match what we were expecting. So now what we want to show, we have I pre-set up a little staging server here for my project. And as I kind of discussed in the first video, the only way to really get to deploy to it is just by using some sort of FTP. Lots of editors have FTP just kind of built in, and you can use that to you can configure all that and build it, and that's fine. That's probably still useful in some cases, but it's also nice to have a pristine staging server that's always up to date, always reliable with the latest version of the code. And even further, if you wanted to do a continuous deployment to production, there's some things we could do there. And so all I'm going to show today is just whenever the build succeeds, adding some more lifecycle hooks into the Travis build that actually then deploys the project to a remote server. And this will be, I'll have a little bit more technical stuff to this part because there is some security and some stuff you have to set up just right to make this work. So fortunately, we have the screencast to review if we need to. But so what I'm going to do first, I'm going to kind of grab my next section here from my example. I missed a little bit of it. Oh yeah, I don't need to do some of those steps. Clean that up in case I want to use this somewhere else. Won't need that. Okay. So I've kind of listed these in the file. I don't think the order matters, but I've kind of listed these little statements in the order that I believe that they execute. There's before install, before script, and then there's probably like an after script hook that I didn't need here. But the next big section is the deploy. So there's a before deploy and then a deploy. So in the before deploy section, what we're going to need to do is, because we're using secure FTP, we need to provide the credentials. Well, in either case, FTP or secure FTP, we would need to have credentials to log onto the server. But with SFTP, we have the option to use a pre-shared key rather than a username password authentication. And so, and that's even what I'm doing out here. It's as you know, when I connect, I'm not putting a password in. It's just relying on a key that I have already set up in my Windows SSH agent. So it's very common to use SSH keys to do this type of deployment. So the problem, though, is in order to deploy from the host that Travis is running the build from, is it has to have your private key, which is the secret portion of the key, in its environment in order to make the FTP. Now, the other end, the server, will have just the public copy, which anyone could see, but this has to have the private key. So I'm sure there's plenty of folks out there, when you're dealing with like a private repository, they probably just check in their secret key. Yes, it is on a third-party server, but for all intents and purposes, it's it's scoped to just you. No one publicly would be able to find it. But in this case in particular, and probably is the best practice in general, since this is a public repository, I can't just put my private key into, I can't just check that in or put it anywhere in my build script here, because anyone would be able to see that and then use that key to do whatever they wanted to our staging server. Now, so with the way that you can kind of work around this is by using Travis's command line tools to encrypt a file before it gets committed. So we're actually going to generate the key, then on top of that, encrypt the key with OpenSSL, check in the encrypted key, and then inside the Travis environment, we don't have it yet. I'll show you kind of where it's going to go, and then we'll come back to it. But inside Travis, if you go to more options on the particular repo, go to more options, settings, There's some kind of like back of the house information that can be sort of stored in here. And some of that is these environment variables. And it's going to populate this for me here in a minute. Um, so again, some of this stuff, the actual commands aren't super important, but it is going to be kind of technical to see everything that's going to go here. But I will walk through and try to explain as best I can. So again, I'm using the same server that my website or the website that we're deploying to is hosted on to run the Travis command line tools. There's nothing that I have to do that. There's just some issues with, you can run Travis on Windows, the command line tools on Windows, but there's just some weird problems with encrypted files. And so rather than even messing with that, I even tried to get it working in the Windows subsystem for Linux, and that wasn't working either. So I just need a dedicated Linux box. It could be a VM on your computer or a remote computer, either one. So I'll show you what I'm doing here. In this case, I wanted to. What I'm going to do is I went ahead and checked out that same project that I had in my editor here, the same cold box project. I checked it out in the command line over here, and so I have the same files. See if I can do a git pull. See if it's staying. Okay. Yeah, it looks like it's staying up to date. It should have it has my latest Travis file. So it looks like it's up to date. What I'm going to do in this project, you wouldn't strictly have to do it here, but it'll be just easier for me just to commit the encrypted key from here than copying it off the server and pasting it in, and I don't have to output it in the screencast or anything like that by doing it this way. So what I'm going to do, as I mentioned, I've already installed Travis, so that's ready to go. I've already logged into Travis using Travis login, I think. And so now what I'm going to do is before I do that, I need to generate a key. So important step. That wasn't the right thing. Who knows what I pasted in there? Okay, so, oh my gosh. It's tab completion's kind of blowing up on me there. So it says SSH keygen. So this is one of the tools that comes with SSH. And what I'm telling you here is generate an RSA key with 4,096 bytes encryption key, and then it's going to put the comment in as build@travisci.org. I think that's arbitrary. That's just so we know what it's for, and it's going to output it to this file called deploy RSA. Again, there's not anything, it's not the point of what I'm trying to get at here, but you have to generate a key. So basically what I have now, if I list my files, it created two files. It created a deploy RSA, which is the private file, the private key, and the deploy RSA.pub, which is the public key. So what I need to do here is I'm going to copy. So I'm going to copy this public key into this. So this system, I'm using just using root for the FTP. Normally you'd have a dedicated user for that, but this is just kind of a throwaway server. So I'm going to, in the roots .ssh authorized keys, I'm just going to edit that file and paste at the bottom of it here, paste in that public key. So I copy the contents of that deploy_rsa.pub, just everything that was in that file, I copied it into, at the bottom, I appended it to this file. And so now we have the ability to use that private key, the deploy RSA private key, to log in or hopefully do an SFTP or an rsync based file transfer to the server. So now what I don't want to do is commit the private key as is, because anyone who saw that in my GitHub repo would then be able to use that as a credential to access the server. So what I'm going to do here is encrypt using the Travis command line tools to take that file's input. Oh man, this is terrible. Sorry, my copy and paste is way off. Help me out there. Yeah, it's just copying all sorts of stuff. Okay. So I'm going to run this Travis encrypt file deploy RSA --add. So let's see if that works. Protected repository, yes, that's correct. Okay. Yeah, and it even says here, make sure not to add deploy RSA to the Git repository. In fact, at this point, you could pretty much just delete it, assuming you're not using it for anything else. So what it did is it created a deploy RSA.inc.enc. So that's an encrypted version of the other file, and that's the file that I'll deploy to my repository. It also updated the Travis file for me and added, you can see it right here in the before install phase, it added this command OpenSSL with these parameters, and it gives it these keys, and it takes the encrypted file we just created as input and it outputs the file that I'm not wanting to commit. So basically Travis has a way of decrypting and getting the private key so it can do a secure FTP, but it only happens during the build. It's never presented in the build log, and it's never checked into GitHub directly. So what that did, though, is also, I think if we come back here, it automatically created some environment variables here for us. And this is where it's storing information about how to decrypt that file. So this is not part of my GitHub repository. This is strictly part of my Travis environment. So if I deleted this or I changed something, you know, I wouldn't be able to recover that same exact file from just GitHub. I would have to redo the steps I just did in order to get back to where I was and redo all this. So, but now that it's got these encrypted, the IV and the key in here, it now can decrypt that file whenever it runs the build. So I'm just going to commit these from here. So I'll do an add of deploy RSA inc, and I'll add the updates to the Travis YAML file and commit that. Added SSH key, should say added encrypted SSH key, and it's wanting me to give some information for get here. Whoops, what did I do wrong? Global. And get config global user.name. So there we go. Okay, and so let me do a, I think it can see this status. So to be committed. So let me do that commit again. Okay, now I can push that here. That's the only part I'm going to do from, oh, great. That wasn't it. Okay, hold on, video. Okay, paste in your password. Okay, great. Okay, so push that out. I'll pull over here and make sure I've got it. And actually that commit will trigger a build, but I don't think we've changed enough. We could verify that the file was being decrypted successfully, but beyond that we haven't really changed much. But it did that push to trigger the build. There's ways you could probably may apply in some cases. There's ways you can filter down, like if you commit certain files, maybe a documentation or some sort of inconsequential change that, you know, you can. There's one thing you can do is like you can do in your commit statement, you can do something like skip CI or something like that, and that'll tell the Travis to ignore this commit. Don't automatically trigger a build if you know for whatever reason you're about to do a different commit right after it, or you know it doesn't need to be rebuilt. So anyway, I could have done that in this case because we don't really need to rebuild it at this moment, but you can see it working, which is nice. You can see it did decrypt that. Again, usually with Travis, no output is good news. So it runs a command, you don't get any output. That basically means that succeeded. But it's going to go through the whole process. What we need to do now, though, is add. What we now have was an environment set up. Well, let me close this. Make sure I have. Treves. I'm going to get what I had there. Okay, yeah, this looks better. So let me copy some of that stuff back here. I had some offline changes. So before deploy, it's going to decrypt that. So it did that. It pushed that into before install. I mean, it doesn't really matter where it goes. I might put it in the deploy section. So I'm just sort of replacing. I need to use their exact string though. I can't just delete that. So put that down here. I'm just moving it kind of around where it is going to do it inside the life cycle, but it's not going to affect too much there. Formatting consistent. Okay, so now, oh great, which one was it? I forgot which of those strings was the right one, so I'll just look in my build settings real quick, make sure I don't delete the wrong one. More options, settings, and then ends with 243E. That's the one we need to keep. And so that's this one. So I'm going to delete this one. Okay, so now what I have in my before deploy step, it's going to do this decrypt of this file. It's going to start the SSH agent, which is a program that runs and manages keys. So you start the agent up, and then with this, you have to set the right permissions on it. That's what chmod does. And then SSH add takes the key that just got decrypted. It's actually, in order for this to work the way it's shown here, I need to change this path. It's outputting to /temp/deploy, so there's no chance of it being deployed from your project directory. And it's putting in /temp, which is outside of what's getting deployed. So, and then I call SSH add, which will take that key and put it in the agent. So any calls that get made with SSH or rsync will automatically be able to use that key. So that's kind of the before deploy process. I'm going to go ahead and try to add the final bit here. So this will be the actual commands that we want to run the deploy. Again, there's a ton of details. One thing I will take time to point out here, let me see if I can find the help. Okay, so if you ever go look in the Travis docs here, there's so many things to all the languages that they support are in here, and then all the things that they can do from a deployment standpoint. You can deploy to any of these commercial environments, all the AWS targets. You could create builds and deploy them to AWS S3. You could deploy to Heroku. You could create packages that would be pushed into something like the Ruby gems, or you could push stuff out to GitHub pages. So we're using the most simple type of environment, I think, under script, which is just to do an FTP. I think it kind of covers that somewhere in here, maybe somewhere it shows about how to do the FTP stuff. But just the point is, you could do a whole lot more than what we're doing here as far as the deploy step. So what we are going to do is run this one rsync command. Again, this will run in context of the build environment. So it's just like running rsync on the Travis host. I've got some stuff in here. -r is recursive, -- delete after deletes files that are not present in the project. So obviously you have to be kind of careful with that. The excludes, there's probably a cleaner way to format this, but I'm just excluding files that I don't want to deploy at any point. So the Git directory is important. You don't want that to be deployed. Otherwise, everything in the root is going to be pushed out. So if it's not in one of these exclude statements, it's getting pushed out. So again, it could probably be formatted nicer than just this one long line, but that's kind of what was in here. And so the final piece of this is this line's important. It's going to say take this build directory. So I'm using an environment variable that gets created in Travis called Travis build directory, saying take this directory that we're in and deploy all the contents of it recursively to this remote target. So the username is root. It's going to use that key that we created. This is the host name that I set up. And then it's going to deploy it to the var www HTML directory, which I know is where the project is located on the server. So that's that. That's all that is needed. And so if we commit this, we should be able to tell pretty quickly if it's going to deploy or not. So stage this and added deploy step. Push that out, trigger the build. It's going to go through and test. The nice thing is it'll only update the staging server if the tests succeed. So it won't create an unstable environment there until the tests are passing inside of Travis. So let's go back to that. All right. So it's off and running. Hopefully this will all work. It took me a while to get this all put together the first time. Definitely ran into some silly mistakes. So did this in the last week, so fortunately all this commands and stuff are still relevant and accurate. I'm sure a month from now they'll need to do something slightly different to make it all work, but as of today, it should be good. I don't know what it did there. It's kind of a weird progress meter that got output. Okay, so it's firing up the server, and so that it can run tests. Some of the other projects I've seen, they'll actually create a matrix of servers, and so you can test for ColdBox anyway. It's nice to be able to test on different Cold Fusion servers, the commercial server, the open source server, test different versions, and you can structure that all on your Travis file. And so you actually, every time you commit, you're getting more tests. Like if I just run the tests on my computer, I'm basically just getting the test for whatever server environment I have. But in Travis, you could actually tell it to try multiple server environments, which could be important for an open source project that may need to work in a variety of environments. So all the tests passed. So hopefully it'll move on to the deployment step. Oh, I think I have the wrong. Yeah. Let's see what happened there. Unfortunately, we'll have to redo it. Let me commit it and I'll talk about it. Just want to get that started. What had happened is I had it branch develop. So the repository that I started on had both a develop and a master branch. Since this was just a sample project, I just have the one branch. But normally that would be good. Any type of real project you'd probably want to do, you'd only be deploying to the staging server if the commit was to the develop branch. And then you could have a separate deploy step for if a commit was made to the master branch that then pushed to the production server. So because you only have the one branch, I had to change it to master here and then recommit. So it needs to go through the build one more time. But it did the right thing. I just didn't have that updated in my notes. So I will do that here in case we reference this later. Okay, let's see where the build's going. Again, I'm kind of new to Travis. I think there's things you can get to monitor the status, inside your IDE or whatever. But I mean, so far I've been pleased with just using the web GUI. So let's see where we're at. Oh, it's already passed the test, so it's moving along here. Ah, failed to deploy. Okay, what did it say? So added the host key, which is correct. Connection, okay, public key, rsync error, unexplained error code, script failed to deploy. So I think everything looks right. It added yeah, I can tell here it added the SSH key and it's logging in as root. It may be something permission denied. Okay, so what we need to just take a quick look at is we can hop over to the server it's trying to deploy to and see if we can tell in here what it's having an issue with. Okay, read key blob failed. Okay, I think the problem is I think that this pub file didn't get brought in correctly to the authorized keys. So yeah, let me edit that real quick. Okay, so authorized keys. So I'll just read the file directly. Deploy RSA. I don't know if that's what it was saying, but it kind of seemed like, oh yeah, that's the problem. Because you see when I delete these lines, it's deleting, it needs to think of it as all as one line. And the fact that it was seeing that as one, because of the way I copied and pasted it, it added new lines to that file that didn't need to be there. So hopefully that'll solve that. So what we could do, since we don't really need to commit anything, we didn't change anything there, we just changed something on the target server. I'll just click restart build here. And so I don't have to commit something. I can just redo that same thing and rerun it. While that's going, I wanted to talk about something real quick. And if you want to see some pretty good examples of some of this working in the wild here, I've really been impressed if anyone's used Bootstrap. If you've looked at their source project, they have some really good, well built out Travis integration. And you can even see, this is what I was trying to show earlier, is you can see all their different statuses that are being generated by Travis. You can click right into the build and get the exact same environment that we were looking at, but you get to see, someone committed to this project about an hour ago. You can come in and actually look and investigate the build log. Even though this isn't something I'm working on, it's nice to be able to see how a much larger application, a much larger project structure their build. I can actually come in here and learn, oh, okay, here's a way I can do this and add this to my build by looking at this large project. I get all the details. Normally, if you would have to, in the past, without something like Travis, you would have to check out the entire project, get all this stuff configured and run it, and then you could see how it worked. But more than likely, I'm not going to be able to do that very quickly. It's nice to be able to come in here and just sort of glean information without having to get the full thing set up. So I really recommend looking at the Bootstrap project. But any project that has that build passing that you have access to, you should be able to drill right into that and see what's happening in their continuous integration. You can come in and look at their Travis YAML file, all open source. You can see how different things are working, what's triggering the build. Their project is node based, which is kind of a nice catch-all package format for a package that's not, Bootstrap's not really a node project, but npm and node's like a good default package if you don't have a language that really makes sense. So front end stuff a lot of times doesn't really have a packaging tool. So if you look at their package JSON, this is kind of where the meat of the stuff's happening. You can see they have all these different scripts and different some of these different scripts are called from different points in the Travis life cycle, and you can just see exactly how they set it up and what they're doing. And really, it's a really nice thing to be able to kind of come and kind of glean some ideas from. So just let you know that's out there. Let's see how that build looks like. We got a green at least, so let's see what happened. Okay, it says deploying application. Yep, no errors. One warning, that's no big deal. So now we didn't really change anything, but if we come out here, the site should still be running. Oh, you did see it change from cold box to TWD, so our change got deployed. So that's kind of the whole thing that I wanted to show. That's kind of demonstrating automated testing, and then on top of that, doing automated deployment. You can see how this could be super useful in team environments or any place where you need to kind of be able to get quick feedback on your changes. So I think it could even be useful in a solo project. And again, with Travis, just can't stress enough how much they've built out, how robust their platform is. Everything you saw here, there was no cost. I mean, maybe the server that I spun up has a fraction of a cost, but nothing that was part of Travis or anything like that. All these different builds and tools that are being run, there was no cost to me, either on the GitHub side or the Travis side, to get this up and running. So anyway, I hope this was useful. Just wanted to do this quick overview, and if you guys have any questions, just ping me on Slack and we can dig into it further. Thanks a lot.